Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, blindfolded. You're told to take a step forward, but everything in you resists. Your mind screams, what if I fall? What if there's nothing beneath me? Now, what if I told you there is something beneath you? You just can't see it yet. That's what walking by faith looks like. It's terrifying, it's uncertain, and it's uncomfortable. But here's the truth. Faith isn't about knowing what's ahead. It's about knowing who is ahead. Today, let's talk about what it really means to trust God's plan, not just when things are going well, but when we feel lost, afraid, and uncertain. Because faith isn't about sight, it's about trust. We live in a world that teaches us to take charge, make plans, set goals, and work hard to create the life we want. From an early age, we are told that success is in our hands, that if we just make the right choices, put in enough effort, and stay disciplined, everything will go according to plan. It's a comforting thought, this idea that we have control over our future. But here's the problem. Control is an illusion. We don't control the economy. We don't control the opportunities that come our way. We don't control other people's choices. We don't control the unexpected twists and turns that life throws at us. Yet we try. We try to predict outcomes. We strategize, analyze, and obsess over details, convinced that if we just work hard enough, think long enough, and plan smart enough, we can shape the future exactly as we want it to be. And when things go according to plan, we feel powerful, we pat ourselves on the back and believe we've mastered the game. But the moment something falls apart, a job loss, a sudden illness, an unforeseen crisis, we are reminded, sometimes painfully, that our control was never real in the first place. Think about how much stress, anxiety, and worry we carry simply because we believe we have to control everything. We play out worst-case scenarios in our minds, as if worrying will prevent them from happening. We hold on tightly to relationships, careers, and outcomes, afraid that if we loosen our grip even slightly, everything will come crashing down. But what if the very act of trying to control is what's making us feel so out of control? What if the peace we are searching for doesn't come from managing every detail of our lives, but from surrendering to something greater than ourselves? The truth is, we were never meant to carry the burden of controlling everything. And the more we fight for control, the more we realize how little of it we actually have. Real trust begins when we recognize that our job was never to orchestrate the plan. It was simply to walk in faith even when we don't understand it. Fear is a powerful force. It has the ability to paralyze us, to keep us stuck, to make us question everything we once believed. It whispers in our ears late at night, filling our minds with doubts and worst-case scenarios. It makes us hesitate, second-guess, and cling to what feels safe. Because at its core, fear is rooted in uncertainty. We fear what we don't understand. We fear what we can't control. We fear stepping into the unknown because we don't know what's waiting for us on the other side. And yet, faith asks us to do exactly that. Faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is moving forward despite fear. It's choosing to trust even when we don't have all the answers. It's believing in something bigger than our immediate circumstances, something greater than the voices telling us to turn back. But, let's be honest, faith is uncomfortable. It requires us to let go of our need for certainty, to release the grip we have on our own plans, and to embrace the reality that we won't always have clear evidence before we take the next step. That's why fear feels easier. Fear tells us to stay where we are. Fear convinces us that playing it safe is the best option. Fear makes us believe that if we can't see the whole path, then maybe we shouldn't take the first step. But here's the thing, every time we give in to fear, we build a habit of retreating. Every time we hesitate, every time we delay, every time we say, maybe later, We reinforce the idea that safety is found in staying still. And that's not how faith works. Faith calls us to move even when our knees are shaking. Faith asks us to trust even when the road ahead is unclear. Faith is stepping out when everything in us wants to hold back. Think about Peter stepping out of the boat. The storm was raging, the waves were high, and Jesus called him to come. Logic said it was impossible. Fear said he would sink. But faith said, step out. And for a moment he did. For a moment he walked on water. Not because he had all the answers, not because he knew exactly how it would work, but because he trusted the one who called him. But the moment he shifted his focus from faith to fear, he started sinking. Isn't that what happens to us? The second we take our eyes off faith and fix them on fear, we start to drown in doubt. We let the what-ifs consume us. We let the uncertainties dictate our decisions. We let the storms around us convince us that we were never meant to step out in the first place. Fear will always exist. It will always try to creep in. It will always whisper reasons why we should stay where we are. But faith invites us to rise above it. Faith reminds us that we don't walk alone. Faith tells us that even when we can't see the way forward, the one who leads us already knows the way. Perspective shapes everything. It influences how we see the world, how we respond to challenges, and ultimately how we navigate our faith journey. Two people can look at the exact same situation and see two completely different realities. Not because the circumstances are different, but because their perspective is. Think about this. You're driving down a road and suddenly traffic comes to a complete stop. You're frustrated. You had somewhere to be, a schedule to keep, and now you're stuck. You start thinking, why now? Why me? This is ruining my whole day. But what if, from a helicopter above, someone could see what you couldn't? What if there was an accident just a few miles ahead, and this delay was actually keeping you safe? Nothing about the situation changed. Only your understanding of it. That's the power of perspective. We live our lives on the ground level. We see only what's right in front of us. We analyze situations based on what we know, what we feel, and what we expect. And when things don't go according to plan, when life throws us unexpected detours, we assume something has gone wrong, but God sees from above. Where we see delays, He sees divine timing. Where we see obstacles, He sees opportunities. Where we see endings, He sees new beginnings. The challenge isn't the situation itself, it's our perception of it. Look at the story of Joseph. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. If you had asked Joseph in those moments, he might have said, this isn't fair, this isn't right, this isn't what my life was supposed to look like. But years later, when he stood as second in command of Egypt, saving countless lives during a famine, he saw what he couldn't see before. He told his brothers, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. His circumstances didn't change overnight. His struggles were real. His pain was real. But in the end, he realized that what once looked like a series of misfortunes was actually the hand of God positioning him for something greater. Perspective. How often do we assume that God is absent just because we don't see immediate results? How often do we let disappointment define our faith instead of trusting that there's more to the story? Imagine an artist painting a masterpiece. If you stand too close, all you see are random brushstrokes. Some dark, some light, some chaotic. It doesn't make sense. But when you step back, when you gain perspective, you begin to see the full picture. That's how God works. But the problem is, we want instant clarity. We want to understand everything in real time. We want every setback to come with an explanation, every delay to make immediate sense. And when it doesn't, we assume something is wrong. But what if nothing is wrong? What if the struggles we face today are simply brushstrokes on a canvas we can't fully see yet? What if, years from now, we look back and realize that the moments we resented were actually the moments that shaped us? The power of perspective isn't about changing our circumstances, it's about changing how we see them. It's about realizing that just because we can't see the full picture doesn't mean there isn't one. It's about trusting that even in the confusion, even in the waiting, even in the moments that don't make sense, there is a bigger plan at work. Waiting is hard. It goes against everything in us. We live in a world that values speed, efficiency, and immediate results. We want fast food, instant downloads, same-day shipping, and answers right now. When we send a message, we expect a response within seconds. When we set a goal, we want to see progress immediately. When we pray, we hope for an answer now. But faith doesn't work like that. Faith requires waiting. It demands patience. And not just any kind of patience. The kind that trusts even when there's no visible progress, even when nothing seems to be happening, even when the silence feels deafening. And that's where we struggle, because waiting feels like wasting. If we're not moving, achieving, or seeing results, we assume nothing is happening. But what if waiting isn't wasting? What if the delay isn't denial? What if the season of uncertainty is actually preparation for something we're not ready for yet? Think about planting a seed. You place it in the soil, cover it up, and then nothing. At least that's what it looks like. Days go by, weeks even, and you don't see anything happening above the surface. If you didn't know any better, you might assume the seed was dead, that nothing was growing, that it was pointless. But beneath the surface, something is happening. Roots are forming, foundations are being set, the seed is preparing to break through. And in the right time, when it's strong enough, when it's ready, it will emerge. That's how God works. But we don't like that, do we? We don't like the in-between. We want to see the progress, to know that something is happening. When we don't see movement, we start to doubt, we question the process. We try to force things to happen on our own timeline. Look at Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a child, but years passed and nothing happened. The waiting became unbearable. So they took matters into their own hands, trying to force the promise instead of trusting the timing. And in doing so, they created more struggle, more pain, more complications. How often do we do the same? How often do we rush ahead of God because we think He's taking too long? But here's the truth. When we try to control the timeline, we often delay the blessing. When we force things before their time, we create unnecessary struggles. Think about a butterfly. Before it can fly, it has to go through the transformation inside a cocoon. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening, but inside, it's being completely remade. If you try to help it too soon, if you force it out of the cocoon before it's ready, it won't survive. The struggle, the waiting, the time in the unknown, it's all necessary for its strength. So what if our waiting isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? What if the delay is actually protecting us from something we can't see yet? The problem isn't that God isn't working. The problem is that we don't like His timing. But what if we shifted our perspective? What if instead of seeing waiting as wasted time, we saw it as a season of growth? What if instead of focusing on what we don't see, we trusted that something is happening beneath the surface? Because patience in the unknown isn't about doing nothing. It's about trusting that something is happening, even when we can't see it yet. It's about believing that just because we don't have all the answers right now, doesn't mean there aren't answers. It's about recognizing that the greatest things in life, growth, transformation, purpose, take time. Letting go is one of the hardest things we will ever have to do. We cling to what is familiar, to what is comfortable, to what feels safe. We hold on to relationships that are no longer serving us, dreams that aren't unfolding the way we imagined, and expectations that were never meant for us in the first place. Why? Because letting go feels like losing control. And we don't like that. We want to know what's next. We want guarantees. We want to be certain that if we release something, something better will immediately take its place. But faith doesn't work that way. faith asks us to let go before we see what's coming next. It asks us to trust that even though we don't have all the answers, God does. But here's the challenge. Letting go isn't passive. It's not about giving up. It's not about sitting back and doing nothing. It's an active decision to surrender what we cannot control and trust that something greater is ahead. Think about a child learning to swim. At first, they cling to the edge of the pool, afraid to let go. The water feels too deep, too unpredictable. But at some point, they have to release their grip and trust that they can float, that they can move forward, that they won't sink. That's what faith looks like. But we resist it. We hold on to things that are breaking us. We hold on to people who have already let go of us. We hold on to plans that are no longer aligned with God's purpose for our lives. And the longer we hold on, the heavier it becomes. Look at the story of the Israelites in the wilderness. God rescued them from Egypt, but they struggled to let go of their past. They kept looking back, longing for what was familiar, even though it was a place of slavery. They were free, but they didn't feel free, because even though they had left Egypt, Egypt hadn't left them. How often do we do the same? How often do we say we trust God, but still hold on to our own way? How often do we pray for direction, but refuse to let go of our own plans? How often do we ask for new opportunities, but cling to what's comfortable because stepping into the unknown feels too risky? The truth is, we cannot receive what's next if our hands are full of what was. Sometimes, God asks us to let go, not because He is taking something from us, but because He is making room for something better. Sometimes, what feels like a loss is actually a setup for something greater. But we don't see it in the moment. We see the pain of release. We see the uncertainty of what's ahead. We see the discomfort of not having all the answers. And that's where faith comes in. Faith is trusting that even when we don't understand why something is being removed, God's plan is still good. Faith is believing that even when we don't see the full picture, there is one. Faith is knowing that our future is not built on our ability to hold on, but on our willingness to surrender. So why do we fight it? Why do we hold on so tightly to things that were never meant to stay? Because we assume that letting go means losing. But what if letting go is actually gaining? What if releasing our grip is the very thing that allows us to step into something greater? What if the freedom we're searching for isn't found in control, but in surrender? Because the truth is, we can either hold on to what's comfortable or step into what's possible, but we can't do both. Every step we take, whether forward, backward, or even the ones that feel like we're standing still, has purpose. But the problem is, we don't always see it. We live in a results-driven world. We measure success by milestones, achievements, and visible progress. We celebrate the victories, the promotions, the breakthroughs, and the answered prayers. But what about the steps in between? What about the seasons of waiting, the detours, the setbacks? Do those matter? They do, more than we realize. Because purpose isn't just found in the destination, it's woven into the journey. But we struggle with that. We want clear direction. We want to know that every step we take is leading to something significant. And when we don't see immediate results, when the road ahead is unclear, we assume we've taken a wrong turn. But what if we haven't? What if every step, even the ones that feel uncertain, are leading us exactly where we're meant to be? Look at the life of David. Before he became king, he was a shepherd. Before he led a nation, he spent years tending sheep, fighting lions and bears, and playing music in solitude. If you had asked him in those early years if he saw the purpose in his everyday tasks, he might have struggled to find an answer. But every step, every challenge, every mundane moment, every battle was preparing him for what was ahead. What looked like ordinary steps were actually training grounds for his destiny. And the same is true for us. But we don't always recognize it. We look at the job we don't love, the relationship that ended, the dream that hasn't come to pass yet, and we wonder, what's the point? We compare our journey to others, questioning why their progress seems faster, their path clearer, We get frustrated when we don't see immediate evidence that we're on the right track. But faith isn't about seeing the full picture, it's about trusting that there is one. And that's hard, because we want confirmation before we take the next step. We want to know why something is happening, when it will make sense, and how it will all come together. But faith asks us to walk even when we don't have all the answers. Think about a puzzle. When you first dump the pieces on the table, it looks like a mess. Nothing fits together, nothing makes sense. But as you keep going, as you put one piece in place at a time, the picture starts to form. Our lives are like that. Every step, every season, every experience, whether joyful, painful, or confusing, is a piece of the bigger picture. But we don't see it right away. And that's where trust comes in. Trusting that even when we don't understand why certain steps feel small, delayed, or even like failures, they are still leading us somewhere. Trusting that just because we don't have all the answers today doesn't mean there aren't answers. Trusting that nothing is wasted. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading the Israelites to the Promised Land. Joseph endured betrayal, slavery, and prison before stepping into his destiny. Esther had to wait for the right moment to step into her calling. In every story, there were steps that felt insignificant. There were moments that seemed pointless. There were delays that looked like dead ends. But they weren't, because every step, no matter how small, frustrating, or unclear, was necessary. Every step had a purpose. Every step was shaping them for what was coming next. And the same is true for us. But the question is, can we keep walking even when we don't see the full picture yet? Can we trust that even when the road doesn't make sense, we are still moving towards something meaningful? Can we believe that purpose isn't just in the arrival, but in every single step along the way? Trusting God's plan, walking by faith and not by sight, is not always easy. It requires us to release our grip on control, to face our fears with unwavering belief, to shift our perspective when life doesn't make sense, to embrace patience in the unknown, to let go of what was, and to trust that there is purpose in every single step. But here's the truth. God is always working, even when we can't see it. The moments that feel uncertain, the seasons that seem slow, the steps that appear insignificant, they all matter. Because faith isn't about understanding everything in the moment. It's about trusting the one who sees the full picture. Fear will try to hold us back. Doubt will make us question. Impatience will tempt us to force things before their time. But faith invites us to keep walking, even when we don't have all the answers. So the question isn't whether God has a plan. The question is, will we trust it? Will we surrender what we cannot control, step forward even when the path is unclear, and believe that every delay, every detour, every challenge is leading us exactly where we are meant to be? Because in the end, faith isn't about seeing, it's about believing. It's about knowing that we are held, guided, and led by a God who never fails. And when we choose to walk by faith and not by sight, we discover that the journey itself was always part of the plan.